Alrighty guys, welcome to Let's Talk About It. My name is Kay and I'll be your host. And today I am super excited because we have Benny V with us.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, super excited. Benny V, tell me something about yourself.
Okay, so if I had to give you a little bit of a spiel about myself, introduction, I'm from Buffalo, New York.
Nice.
I love the Buffalo Bills.
Go.
I love chicken wings. You know,
Yeah.
I live and breathe Buffalo. But more than that, I'm a Christ follower. And a fun fact about me is that I love dogs.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now, Benny V, do you own a dog?
I do. I own 3, in fact.
Oh, 3? I thought you only had 1. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have 1 puppy, and her name is Kobe. She's a wiener dog. And then I have 2 more, Buddy and Murphy. So they're all great.
That's awesome. Well, cool. We're so excited that you're here. And just to kind of give you guys a rundown of what we're going to be doing. So since this is called Let's Talk About It, so a bunch of you have kind of sent in different questions. And Benny V has no idea what I'm going to ask him. So I'm going to kind of ask him off the cuff a couple different questions and just kind of have a chill conversation about what you guys are asking, like whether it's how to live out your faith or, you know, maybe a more generic question. So we're here for you. And so let's get started with our first question.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So Ben, how would you recommend inviting someone to church or youth group without it being awkward or pushy?
That's a great question. I think it's a great question because so many of us can feel this fear around asking people to come sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're asking them to come to youth group or church, or you know, whenever I felt like, or when I was asking my friends to do that as a kid, I always felt like it was a chore sometimes. And so what I usually did to avoid that or make it feel a little bit more comfortable was just to be honest, you know, about what we do here is that, you know, we do follow Christ and we do love Jesus, but that doesn't mean that we can't have fun too, you know, because the Lord calls us to be excited and to have fun. And that's what we love to do here. So just be honest with them, and that'd be my advice.
Yeah, I love that too. And I feel like it gets easier as you do it more, as you make it more of like a rhythm.
Absolutely.
But yeah, initially, it definitely is tough, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you handle like stressful buildup and expecting too much of yourself?
I see. That's a great question. That's something that I experience a lot. You know, this competitiveness with yourself, right? Holding yourself to a high standard. And so I would say just remembering that we're all, you know, perfectly made. It's a cliche thing sometimes for some people, but it's so true that we're all made perfectly in the image of Christ. And that's the important thing to remember when we're getting down on ourselves. When we think we could be doing fill in the blank better, or we should be in this position. It's really easy to think about the things that we don't have instead of the things that God gives us and the truth that God gives us.
Yeah.
So I just say focus on truth.
Focus on truth. And now, what are ways that, like, what do you do to like rest or rejuvenate? Like, what is something that you're like, yes, this is kind of how I rest, or this is a rhythm that I do to kind of help me deal with stress?
It's another great question. And this isn't a comprehensive list. It's different for everybody. There's a book called Sacred Pathways, I believe. Yeah, I'm getting a nod off camera. So Sacred Pathways, it's a really great book. It has a lot of different breakdowns into different ways that people actually connect with the Lord.
Okay.
And so one way that I've personally found works for me is music and nature. You know, I really like to throw my earbuds in, listen to some music, and just appreciate the Lord's creation.
Wow, well, thank you for that. That's definitely helpful. Yeah, I definitely agree with the music aspect. That's something that, like, worship, I'm like, yes, that's how I connect with the Lord. Ooh, this one's exciting. So what is your favorite Bible story and why?
Okay, so there's a lot of good ones. I'll give you 2. There's an Old Testament passage called Isaiah 11. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. I'll let you guys go and look that one up. But my favorite New Testament story, my favorite story from the Gospels, is actually sort of a sad one and a happy one at the same time. So it was after Jesus had told Peter that he was going to deny him 3 times. He said that you would deny me 3 times and then the rooster would crow. And then that's exactly what happened. He denied him before he was crucified, and he went up on the cross. But what was more important is not only that Peter denied Jesus and then, you know, he died. Jesus came back rose from the dead. We were just celebrating Easter a couple days ago, actually.
Yeah.
But what I think is the coolest part about the story is that Peter went back to his old life of being a fisherman after this. And as he was out on his boat one day, he looked over on the beach, and there he saw Jesus preparing him breakfast, actually. He cooked him breakfast on the beach. And so Jesus invited him over and forgave him. And they talked about it then, but what I think is so cool about that story is just how much it shows that Jesus is always going to love us, and how forgiving and compassionate he is. And so I just love that story. I think it just really shows the grace that we're given.
Yeah. So if you could have one breakfast food with Jesus, what would you pick? Like if you're like, yeah, Jesus, let's have breakfast. What's your top food?
Gonna go with the classic. I'm gonna go with a waffle, some fruit, some syrup, some bacon, and a glass of orange juice.
There we go. Yeah, I would like that too. Yeah. All right. This one's a tough one. How do you deal with people who say they are Christians but don't act like it?
That's a great question. I think what's important to keep in mind with that question is that ultimately we're never the judge of people, right? We're never the ones that can judge someone's heart, and we're never the ones that can judge someone's soul. And so what I think is really important is to be encouraging to those people, and to still show them kindness and love, because that's what Jesus calls us to do, right? And when you think about it, there's a lot of times that we've messed up in our lives, and there's a lot of times where if someone had a camera on you, you might not have been the best example of Christ. And so we're all like that. And what's important to keep in mind is that Jesus loves us all anyways. And that we're called and we're able to show love to other people and be kind. So just remember that there's always a reason that someone acts the way that they do. You never know what's going on behind the door. So just always be compassionate and show love to one another is what I would say.
Wow. Yeah, to have that good mindset. Wow. This question's cool. So what human talked about in the Bible would win in an all-out fight?
So anybody mentioned in the Bible?
Anybody mentioned. I'm trying to think.
That's a great question.
I mean, Samson's probably the first one that pops into my head.
Okay. See, Goliath popped into my head, but he got beat by David. David got him with the slingshot.
He got beat by a shepherd boy, so.
I'm not going to say Jesus because that's obvious.
So that's like a no-brainer.
Great question. I think I'm going to have to go Samson. I think it's the easiest answer, but it's the right answer, I feel like.
Because didn't he kill so many people with like a donkey's jawbone? I feel like.
Samson was just yoked, man. He was in the gym daily. He never missed leg day. Samson is the guy. I got to go with Samson.
Yeah, I think you're correct with that one.
I wouldn't underestimate Moses, though.
Why Moses?
I wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, he had God's help, but as did Samson with the hair. Moses split a whole sea in half. So, can't take that too lightly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anybody else. I don't know. What do you think about Gideon?
No, I'm not even going to lie. I don't think I have the background knowledge on Gideon that I would need to judge him in a fight with people.
I don't know. He was kind of a scaredy kid at first,
but
I feel like.
I don't know physically enough about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Samson, they always talk about how big and strong he is. Goliath, he's so big and strong. Moses was kind of an old dude, but. I don't know. I feel like they don't really talk about that too much with other people in the Bible as to how good of a they would be in a fight.
I feel like Samson's gonna be your no-brainer. I mean.
Gotta go with Samson.
Yeah. Yep, I think so too. So, look at this. What is the trait of God you find hardest to see true in your own life? For example, like God making us in His image. So, what is a truth that's hardest to see in your own life?
That's a tough question to think. That's a great question. I don't know. Does anything come to your mind when you think about that question at first? Because that's one that I would think about for a second. The hardest truth about God.
I think for me is God's forgiveness. I think just because we learn about that in church so much, and it's something to never be taken for granted, but I feel like sometimes it's hard for me to see in my daily life that even after accepting Jesus as my Savior, that He still has forgiveness when I mess up, even as a believer. Yeah. And so I love that characteristic of God, but I feel like that's a hard trait for me to sometimes comprehend on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. That's the same reason why the story about Jesus forgiving Peter is one of my favorite. Yeah. As I'm thinking about it, though, one of the maybe not truths about God that I struggle with the most, but just things that I struggle with in the sense of trusting God is just that, is not worrying about things that are going to happen in the future and just trusting in God's sovereignty and hand in things. I think it's really easy for us to do that, right? Is to think about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month, things that we can't really control. And, sometimes it's easy to wonder why God's not steering us in a certain direction. And so kind of just allowing God to have control of that is something I'd say that it is a challenge for me sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Oh, and that ties into the next question. How do I stop worrying so much about the future?
Wow.
Well, let's talk about that.
Wow. So, I mean, I guess maybe I answered that in my response to the previous question. But in my experience, it really is just trusting that God is going to do what he says he's going to do, and that's provide for the people that put their faith and trust in him, right? Yeah. I think this is one of those things that is going to be easier for people to understand and appreciate more just by doing it rather than listening to someone like me say it.
Yeah.
Because I can say, God is faithful and God sticks to his word as much as anybody else can. But in my experience, like I said, personally, whenever I've really lifted those things up to him and kind of let him take control of the things that are going to happen in the future is really when I see his hand in providing for all things. So that's how it's been in my own personal experience.
Yeah, and I like that and how you mentioned Peter's story earlier. I love how in 1 Peter it talks about cast all your anxiety on him for he cares for you. Like, I just love that heartbeat of the character of Peter as well. Well, time is up. Ben, thanks so much for your time. This was awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking some questions and chatting me up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, boys and girls, thanks so much for tuning in. In the comments, ask more questions. We want to hear from you. But thanks so much for your time, and you guys have a great rest of your day.
See ya.